Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome to the breaking news. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon, link in the description below. Today we've been able to get breaking news that Ukraine has fired Storm Shadow missiles and Scalp EGs from the Republic of France and the United Kingdom into the area of the Russian Federation, just north of the active front line inside of Kursk, and near to the town just east of Rilisk. We were able to get this major information today, as just yesterday, American ATACMS slammed down into the GRAU arsenal at Kyiv, knocking out an incredibly large amount of Russian munitions, and once again causing severe Russian supply line shortages, at least within the area of Kursk at the moment. It does appear that the Ukrainians are beginning to use the wide variety of weapons that they are being allowed to use by the United Kingdom, France, and the United States to strike back at the Russian Federation, while their drone forces continue to hit the city of Voronezh heavily, making sure to destroy any vital materials or facilities that would help facilitate the Russian war effort. Meanwhile, it appears that the Russians are trying to make it seem as though the red line may have truly been crossed at this point, as we are getting reports from inside of Moscow that the Russians are considering, and may even possibly be launching here in the very near future, an R26 intercontinental ballistic missile. I do want to make it very clear that this intercontinental ballistic missile will not be nuclear armed, according to what we're hearing, and for the first time ever in operational history of any intercontinental ballistic missile, it will strike the city of Kyiv with a conventional warhead mounted on board. Nevertheless, the message that would be sent with such of a launch would be an incredibly dangerous one, and it does appear, according to many sources, this may be a high likelihood here in the very near future. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear some very odd reports coming out of the area of Donetsk and Luhansk, as we are now starting to see that due to the woes of the Russian manpower situation in fighting this war, they are beginning to recruit Ukrainian citizens living within occupied territories to serve in the Russian armed forces against the Ukrainian state. Meanwhile, we've also been getting some other major information as well from the area around Kyiv, that citizens of Kyrgyzstan have been told to leave, along with all of the major embassy closures that have also happened in Kyiv over the past day, which we'll be talking about a little bit more in detail. And we've also been able to hear that the Yi-Peng, the Chinese merchant vessel that is claimed to have destroyed the telecom cables at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, has been seized by Danish naval authorities and is currently being impounded by the Danish Navy. From what we understand, the captain of the vessel was Russian, once again tying this back towards the Russian Federation as a possible or very likely attempt at sabotage. We have loads and loads of news from today, and not only from today, but from many a month ago, actually, to be entirely honest with you all, about a year and a half ago, as we were able to get an unearthed phone call that was made in between Yevgeny Prigozhin and Lukashenko before Yevgeny Prigozhin was to die only months later, when the Russian Federation shot down his private jet just north of the city of Tver. It is a very interesting look at the behind the scenes of the Wagner coup and what was going on, at least at the moment, and we'll be, of course, talking about that a little bit more here in a moment. But moving on into our major breaking news of today, we were able to hear from the Ukrainians themselves that they have now fired not only ATACMS missiles into the Russian Federation, but they have now also fired British Storm Shadow or Scalp EG missiles into the Russian Federation for the first time ever. Yesterday, we saw for the first time that the Ukrainians had launched the ATACMS missiles into the territory of the Russian Federation. We can actually see the clip right here of those ATACMS being launched, which was the first time in the history of the conflict that the Russian Federation had ever been attacked directly by a Western-made weapon. We can see those missiles then disappearing into the sky, and only a few minutes later, they slammed down into the GRAU arsenal just north of Kyiv, largely knocking out this major ammunition dump and once again causing the Russian Federation critical ammunition shortages, at least within the local area around the Kursk front line. We believe that for the while, that attack would largely be the standalone and probably wouldn't be attempted again. But today, we then heard, just like I was telling y'all, that the Ukrainians have now fired a Storm Shadow or Scalp EG missiles into the Russian Federation. According to the Russian Federation government's claims, they did shoot down pretty much every single Storm Shadow missile, except for, I believe, one, and everything that was damaged due to falling debris. We then saw that that was, of course, largely untrue, because we were actually able to see the point of impact at Marino inside of the Kursk Oblast. Now I'll be moving y'all down into this area to show y'all this. There is actually a large sanatorium in this area around Marino, and it appears that the Russian Federation is using this as a staging ground for their offensive operation operations against the Ukrainians who are currently occupying an area of the Russian Kursk Oblast. The Storm Shadow and Scalp EG missiles all targeted this location in the general area and appear to have all splashed down. There is absolutely no evidence that any of the Storm Shadows were successfully shot down, at least according to the video footage that we have, which we will be showing y'all right here. This was taken by a Ukrainian drone, which was supposed to be filming the impacts and making sure that the proper locations were hit. You can once again see the large building that dominates Marino right there, and it appears that this drone is on the northern eastern side of the town and looking towards the southwest, as we then watch the impacts hitting around the area. We can see our first one right there, and we can see our second one right here. At this moment of the clip is very grainy, by the way, so if it looks like it's lagging, it's not your computer, it's actually this video. But from what we can see, the Ukrainians were able to land at least 3 Storm Shadows at the point of filming right here, showing that the Russians are lying. They shot down every single one but one, because once again, intact Storm Shadows were slamming. Now we see the fourth one in sequential order into the area of Marino. We have now measured 4 hits by Storm Shadows. We're now waiting for a possible other hit as the smoke begins to rise from the affected areas, possibly showing very serious hits to the Russian Federation's armed forces just around the area of this town alone. And as the smoke continues to rise, the recon drone continues to film, showing us the smoke now wafting through the trees just to the west of the town, and we can now see the 5th Storm Shadow hit in this strike so far. The 6th Storm Shadow hit. At this point, we can confirm that 6 Storm Shadow missiles were able to make it through Russian air defense over the Kursk Oblast and into the area of Marino without being shot down or intercepted. That can be confirmed on video footage, and we now have the 7th and the 8th impact of a Storm Shadow. The 9th impact of a Storm Shadow. As many can tell, the Russians are lying through their teeth when they claim that they intercepted any of these missiles, because most of any of them at this point have pretty much been hitting all in the exact same spot and have been causing a critical amount of damage. We're not exactly sure what the target was, however, because it's largely shrouded by tree cover and the Ukrainians have never directly stated what the target was, but at this point, we can now confirm that a 9th Storm Shadow missile has now slammed down into the area. Once again, we're seeing the explosion and the smoke rising from that completely separate explosion. A 10th Storm Shadow has now hit the area. If anyone's not getting it by this point, the Russians lied through their teeth, because they claimed that every single one, but maybe one, was shot down, and we've now seen 10 of them hit in the exact same spot. The footage is still blurry, but giving us a pretty good idea that these strikes have been wildly successful, and it appears that every single strike was hitting some sort of a smaller compound in that tree line, as we can see that it's scattered with debris. We can also see the drone looking around and trying to find any more damage, and it appears that another building may have been hit as well. Whatever was in these buildings was a high priority target because they hit it with 10 Storm Shadow missiles. Now, that's a fairly interesting thing, and we actually can look at the area of Marino, and it was around these buildings right here. Either this entire compound or just one of these buildings in particular, that was the exact target of the Storm Shadow strikes. And from what we would be able to understand, the Ukrainians were able to claim this as a major success. Practically every single Storm Shadow that was fired made it to its target. We are assuming that 10 were fired, and 10 hit their strike location just inside of Marino. And it does appear that this is starting to show that, once again, like we've always known, Russian air defense is largely non-existent. But not only that, British and French weaponry have now been used inside of the territory of the Russian Federation as well. We were also able to get video footage from the ground, letting us hear from a Russian nearby in the town what has happened, and also giving us a little bit better of a picture from the ground. I was in the car and I ran out. We hear another one. There. We hear another impact. F, man. As another one comes in, slamming into the town. He says everything's blowing up now. There's smoke coming from over there. What were they bombing out there? Another one's coming. And we hear them just like we were seeing on the drone film, slamming into the town over and over and over again. We'll probably be on our way from here. Holy moly is what the fellow says. He doesn't even know. We see the smoke rising from the distance. The drone would have just been a little bit to the left of screen where he's looking right there. We hear even more storm shadows coming in.
Бля, нам надо ломиться оттуда, Серега, бля. Я хрен его знает. Прям по наш, здесь на нашу территорию взрывают, там хрен его знает. Вояки вон здесь, бля. Именно что сюда стреляют, бля. Хрен его знает, что за прилеты, бля, это были. Везде вон дым идет. Ебать нахрен, бля. Серега, здесь что-то, бля, нездоровый канитель, бля. Не знаю, где там бомбили, но прям на территории хреначили там, ближе к охране. Так что как-то так, Серега, хрен его узнает, бля. Дым, бля.
And now we can see that silence has fallen on the town as the last intense storm shadow had hit, and the video ends. But both video clips are showing us that around 10 Storm Shadow missiles hit just outside of the eastern area of Marino, and were all successful hits, according to the information that we have at the moment. The Russian Federation has not made a comment exactly on this particular instance about the Storm Shadows being used, but we have, however, seen that they have started to try and make some sort of a direct action about the ATACMS strikes that happened at the GRAU arsenal in Kyiv just the other day. Many people may know that last night while we were on air, we were able to get the breaking news that the U.S. Embassy was going to be closed for today, and today is the very day that we're making this video on. Many people wouldn't know, according to the research that we found out last night, that there has only been 2 times that the Embassy of the United States has been closed inside of Kyiv at any point. One of those days would have been March 27th to March 28th of 2022, pretty much at the very beginning of the war, and the second time is today, meaning that this is a fairly rare occurrence that we see whenever an embassy is to be closed down. We also have been able to hear that multiple other national embassies have shut down in the city of Kyiv over the course of the day and even sometimes tomorrow, and we've also been able to hear that citizens of Kyrgyzstan, a fairly small country in the middle of Central Asia, has called its citizens to leave Ukraine immediately. From what we're understanding, there was a general scare that was given by the Ukrainian intelligence agency yesterday to every embassy within the city that there was going to be a massive and significant attack by the Russian Federation's missile forces and drone forces over the next day, and that everyone needed to seek shelter immediately and hang out. According to the information that we've been able to get today, it seems as though the Ukrainian intelligence is now backing off of that statement, good job to Budanov once again, and is now saying that the statements were largely untrue and nothing more than a hoax that they had gotten from the Russian Federation, and then they ran off of entirely, just without even thinking about it or without even considering if there was any proof to back up that claim. However, we are seeing that those claims may end up becoming true, as we are now hearing that the Russian Federation may be considering the launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile at Ukraine, which is an incredibly odd thing to say, but from what we understand, it looks like it may be a high possibility, as we were able to hear today from multiple sources that Russia is preparing to launch the R26 intercontinental ballistic missile in a possible attack on the capital of Ukraine. Now, I do want to make this very clear that according to the information we have, the RS-26 would not be fired as an ICBM with a MIRV warhead that is nuclear armed. From what we are being told, this missile would be fired with conventional warheads only, but still would be a reminder to the Ukrainians, or a very dangerous warning to pretty much the entirety of the world, that they can use an intercontinental ballistic missile whenever they would wish. Using a Rubesh complex missile, or an R26 for that matter, is an incredibly stupid thing, in my opinion. The fact that the Russian Federation does have shorter range missiles that could fire at Kyiv, at least on a strategic sense, that would be a lot more affordable and a lot more sensible to use in this scenario, and instead they're going to use one of their largest and most advanced ICBMs, is showing an act of desperation by the Russians, as it doesn't really make any economical sense, or strategic sense for that matter, to waste a intercontinental ballistic missile such as this by firing it in a short-range launch with a conventional warhead. I'll be honest, nothing about it really makes any sense, but we are getting information from multiple different sources all over the place, including right here, that according to the panic that is beginning in Ukraine, Russia will respond for the first time with the heavy ballistics of the Rubesh complex, and according to the additional information that we have, it does appear that it will be using some form of a conventional warhead, and we were also able to hear that corroborated by David D., who has been a fairly reliable source on Twitter over the course of the entire conflict. So from what we are understanding, this entire rumor is being put around the high possibility that this is going to happen. There's been a lot of murmurings in the Russian government that this is being prepared, and we could see that something like this may happen here in the very near future. Of course, will it happen? Will it not happen? That's up for only time to decide. We can't really tell for sure on this channel whether the Russian Federation is truly going to launch a R26 ICBM that is conventionally armed at Kyiv, but it does sound as though, according to many news sources today, that seems to be a high possibility and something that will have to be contended with in the future. We have also been hearing out of the Voronezh area, while the Russians have been trying to make this consideration, that Voronezh continues to be hit very heavily by Ukrainian drones, which we're able to see right here. It just seems as though the Russian Federation isn't really doing that well, and to be entirely honest, it also seems as though the allowance of Western weaponry to be used in deep strikes in Russia may actually turn the entire tide of the war permanently into Ukraine and the West's favor, and that must be what the Russians are panicking so greatly about. It doesn't really seem like they have a massive amount of production abilities, which we've known about for most of the war. The economy is nearly in collapse at this point. The Russian central government is fairly weak, considering that they don't really have a lot of funds or finances to work off of, and the Russian Federation's armed forces, no matter how hard they're slamming themselves in Ukrainian defensive lines, never really can make a breakthrough, or never really can make any sort of progress on achieving offensive goals. And it seems as though it's getting so bad on the military side of things with the lack of manpower that not only are they having to get the North Koreans involved in the war, which we now understand there's about 12,000 North Koreans somewhere in Voronezh or Kursk, they're now recruiting Ukrainian citizens from the occupied areas to fight against the state of Ukraine, which we were able to see today. We're going to be muting the music, but this footage was taken from inside of Donetsk, one of the major cities that is within the Russian-occupied areas of Ukraine. From what we're understanding at the moment, the Russian Federation is truly starting to run out of manpower. And while many people know of the Russian Federation as this country that has an inexhaustible level of manpower and is always able to find men to fill up the ranks of their armed forces as they quite literally throw them into a meat grinder time and time again through history, the modern Russian Federation is a shadow of its former self, either as the Soviet Union or the Russian Empire. The modern Russian Federation is generally dealing with a population slide, meaning that each and every single year that the population numbers are taken, there's actually a steady decline. Not only that, but the Second World War, destroying about a quarter of the men in that generation's population, ensured that for the remainder of the Russian Federation's history, there is a major generational gap where there isn't a large amount of children being born because the people who would have had those children in the subsequent generations simply ceased to exist in the Second World War. And for this reason, the Russian Federation is dealing with an endless population decline. Also, combined with the massive fleeing of Russian Federation citizens at the very beginning of the conflict, the Russians truly have a very small manpower pool to work with. And this means that they're having to go literally anywhere and everywhere to be able to find themselves anyone that would be able to fight for them. This has led them to draw the North Koreans directly into the conflict by getting tens of thousands of North Korean troops involved in the war, and we're now starting to see that they're drawing from the occupied areas such as Donetsk and forcing some of these people, possibly, to be a part of the Russian armed forces, or they are volunteering. Either way, it's a violation of the Geneva Convention, and it's once again showing us that the Russians are flagrantly, at this point, violating any rules of war that they need to try and just keep the Russian army alive for however much longer they can. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear some very interesting news coming out of a different area in the world, speaking of how desperate the Russians may be, in the Denmark Strait. The Denmark Strait is a little stretch of sea that connects the Baltic and the North Sea together, and this is a fairly important shipping lane for the Russian Federation, the Baltic and Scandinavian countries that the Danish largely have almost complete control over. Many people heard the other day, and we covered this on our short war stream and, well, not our short war stream, but our short war video and our stream yesterday, that a Chinese vessel called the Yi-Peng appeared to have sabotaged the telecom cables that connected Germany to the Baltics and Scandinavia. This was a fairly major scandal, and many people have been trying to figure out who was the culprit, the Chinese or the Russians. The vessel was Chinese-owned, which made it seem very obvious that it would probably be the Chinese, but at the same time, a lot of people were still believing that the Chinese wouldn't have done something like this, considering that they are generally trying to make it seem as though Europe could be fine without America, and try and split the Western world into two completely separate spheres, an American sphere and then a European sphere. It appears that that seemed to be a highly unlikely theory for that reason that the Chinese would try and sabotage these telecom cables. Nevertheless, today, the Danish Navy took a very assertive action against the Yi-Peng and ended up seizing it. And this was some interesting information that was found. To make sure to read it directly off of GRAU to make sure it's not misquoted. The Chinese vessel Yi-Peng 3 has been chased, intercepted, and boarded by the Danish Navy vessel Y311 after the Chinese vessel destroyed two undersea telecom cables linking Finland and Germany and Sweden and Lithuania. The vessel sailed from Russia, and the captain is Russian. This is a fairly important thing to note. The last place this vessel was in was most likely in St. Petersburg, inside of Russia. When the vessel then set sail again, it appears to have been sailed or commanded by a Russian captain. That Russian captain most likely had the authority of the Russian FSB, along with the Russian Federation's government, to conduct a sabotage mission of the telecom cables at the bottom of the Baltic Sea, and to completely sever any kind of actual wired communications in between the countries of NATO that are around the Baltic Sea area. This appears to be showing that while the vessel is Chinese, the Chinese government may have not had any real involvement in this at all, and this was a plot conspired by the Russian Federation while the ship was in port, and also by the Russian captain, who most likely was contacted by the Russian government to conduct this act of sabotage. If this is the case, this could openly be considered an act of war, especially considering if the Russian captain ever admitted to the sabotage being done by the Russian Federation and done on the request of the Federation to his command. Or, for example, if the Russian Federation was to come out and openly admit that they sabotaged the cables, that actually would be an act of war, as it's a destruction of critical NATO infrastructure, critical infrastructure really of any of these countries involved, and could possibly start a major escalation in between NATO and the Russian Federation, which still seems like it's largely ongoing at this point from what we're being told. But even still, something even more shocking has come out today, rather than that bombshell that the captain of the vessel at the time was a Russian, is that there has been an interesting phone call that has emerged out there in the world, and I've listened to it a couple of times before I started making this video today, and it does appear that this phone call is the real McCoy. It is a 100% genuine, and it seems as though this is something that we've never known about before. This news isn't new, just to make that very clear. This news is maybe about a year and a half old, because this actually deals with the Yevgeny Prigozhin Wagner coup that happened in the summer of 2023. Many people may know that as the 36 hours of chaos inside of the Russian Federation. And oddly enough, a phone call that was made in between Yevgeny Prigozhin and Lukashenko, the dictator of Belarus, has emerged just today that is giving us a very interesting look into the background of what actually may have happened during the Prigozhin coup. And so, I'm going to be bringing y'all over here, and I'm going to be showing y'all this phone call. I'm not going to be talking over it, because I want y'all to be able to hear how convincing the call is. Some people may say that it sounds, well, it may be AI generated, and that's why I'm not going to talk through it. I'm just going to let y'all see the subtitles and listen to them talk themselves, because the mannerisms of both, considering that we've listened to Yevgeny Prigozhin all the way up until he died in the latter part of the summer of 2023, and we've always had to listen to audio clips of Lukashenko to this day, to me, the mannerisms that are being done in these clips just sound way too realistic for this to be a fake or a phony phone call. And for this reason, I want to let y'all all listen to it so that we all can get a little bit of a better idea of what exactly happened in the Wagner coup. From what we understand, it appears that the Belarusians had a very high involvement in it. But nevertheless, here is the clip.
Алло? Алло?
На один.
Алло.
Да, добрый день.
Да, добрый вечер. Вы перезванивали, да? Хотели бы поговорить?
Да. Не, что, переговорил он? Нет, не переговорил. Не знаете?
Я сейчас передам трубочку, он сам скажет.
Ага.
Алло,
Александр Григорьевич,
Женя,
да.
значит, я с ним еще не переговорил. Там
Ага.
все его окружение на ушах, они уже меня и уговаривают, и просят, ну еще чуть-чуть, ну подождите, ну ты знаешь эту ситуацию. Мы вот
Ну
сейчас,
да.
вот чуть-чуть. Но наша пресс-служба, ну такое сделала, может быть, и вредное для нас заявление о том, что мы утром с президентом разговаривали, договорились, что мы будем делать все для мирного разрешения конфликта. И я предложил, что я переговорю с Евгением Пригожиным и попробую, ну, там договориться и так далее.
Да.
На сегодня, да, мы провели раундов несколько переговоров и выработали абсолютно приемлемый вариант бескровного решения этого вопроса. То есть, ну, я уже несколько провоцирую российскую сторону. Возможно, у них другие варианты, понимаешь? Возможно, замочить Пригожина вариант.
Ну, там...
Возможно, всякие. Поэтому,
Нет, мочить Пригожина, там столько тоже погибнет народу, что мама не горюй.
вот об этом речь, что замочить-то можно, но сколько десятков тысяч ляснет народу. Да, и там где-то мост какой-то мы закроем, перекроем, встретим. Ну что встретим? Это же кто там? Ну минимум росгвардейцы максимум какие-то будут. А
Да.
остальная милиция и мобилизованные. Это же неподготовленные люди. Ну, как
Ну,
в 41-м. Поэтому нельзя на это идти. Поэтому вот такое, буквально через 15 минут Эйсмонт готовит заявление от пресс-службы. Но я думаю, Путин поддержит эти предложения. Но хочу тебе, если это будет в этой ситуации более выгодный вариант, просто действовать по нашему плану. Прийти в Беларусь и все и разместиться на этих полигонах. Я скажу, что договоренности были, боевое слаживание, отдых и прочее. Ну, а Путину выскажу свое фэ.
И получится с него бабки, чтобы он оплачивал эти затраты, да?
Слушай, это мы решим, если даже он с ума сойдет и не даст деньги. Мы уже найдем...
Пускай поляки платят, чтобы не сувались к ним.
Может быть и это. Поэтому это мы договоримся. Это есть проблема, но небольшая. Дальше будем работать.
It's a very interesting phone call because it's giving us a lot of a look at how much the Belarusians were actually involved with Wagner before the coup and also during the coup. Lukashenko pretty much acted as the mediator almost on the Wagner side, at least from what we're understanding in the call, against the Russian Federation, and was protecting Yevgeny Prigozhin from any possible harm, at least in the immediate future. And it also seemed that in the call, Lukashenko was already getting an assumption that there was a general plan in the Russian government to try and kill Yevgeny Prigozhin, which is once again tying everything together, largely confirming to us that the theory that his private jet was shot down just north of Torzhok inside of the Tver Oblast by the Russian Federation is 100% true. As we did see that at the moment, it looked as though there was a lot of foul play, and all the video and picture evidence was showing that the aircraft was most likely shot down and did not just happen to break up in flight. Nevertheless, this is giving us a lot more of an insider look into what actually happened, at least on the Belarusian Wagner side, during the Prigozhin coup. We will probably never know what happened on the Russian Wagner side during the coup that really led to the end of the coup, or really the end of the small amount of fighting that was going on at the time, but still a very shocking thing to see, at least at this point. And on that bombshell, it is actually time for us to end our news summary for the day, because this is quite literally everything that we have for the news today. I've got to thank every single person so far who has watched this video and has made it to this point. If you enjoy this massively, if you have enjoyed this greatly here, watching this video, please make sure to subscribe. YouTube does not care about subscribers. Literally does not. And we found that out a while ago. We used to think, at least when we started the channel, that they cared about subscribers. And then we found out that they wiped that out of the algorithms years ago. Subscribers don't really count, at least in pushing the channel. So the only benefit there is to subscribing is letting us know that y'all enjoy our content. And we love to see when people subscribe, because it lets us know that a lot of people are really loving what we do and they want to see more of it. Also, if y'all would like, please make sure to hit the like button on this video and also comment below. But today I want to do something really special, because a lot of people were really excited about everything that was going on in the background last night with the Armed Forces medley that we finally been able to put into our stream. That is an Enforcer original. And so if you do enjoy this channel, please make sure to put down in the comments below LSA. That is an L, an S, and an A. Put that down in the comment section below to let us know that you are a proud member of the Spring Army. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all in the next one.